Good morning, and welcome to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I am located at 1563 Main Street in Peckville, and I am here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. on these stations to bring you, the landowner, valuable information that you need regarding natural gas development here in Pennsylvania. At the Clark Law Firm, my focus is on landowner, solely landowner representation. Do not and will not represent gas or pipeline companies, but only Pennsylvania landowners and oil and gas rights holders here in Pennsylvania. At the Clark Law Firm, I represent landowners for gas lease negotiations, gas lease amendments, extensions, modifications, of course, pipeline agreements, royalty and royalty deduction issues. Going to talk some royalty issues here today. And I'll tell you what, I think this is it's going to be a good show today, and they're going to be a little bit of some complicated information, but I'm going to do my best to present it in a way in which everyone can understand it, and I think it's going to be very valuable. So if you're interested in royalties, royalty deductions, how are royalties calculated to a degree, I'm going to be talking about that some today. I also do estate planning work and doing more and more of that. And regular listeners know that I'm a big believer in if you're having an estate plan, you need a plan for you, not your neighbor, not the guy down the road, not somebody else on the internet. You need a plan for you. Same thing holds true when you're talking about pipeline agreements, gas, any agreement, frankly. Any agreement out there, every person is in a different position. So you need what's best for you. And I say that, I've been working on the pipeline site, and I know I've been saying that for a while, but it's pretty much ready to go live again. Really excited about it because put in a lot of work for it. And one of the things that you'll see here when you go check out pipelineattorney.com is a lot of discussion regarding landowner leverage. And I talk about that a lot. And what we're looking at is, what is your individual leverage? Very, very important. And the idea is that every landowner is in a different situation. It's not, well, here's what my neighbor did. Or, oh boy, this one kills me. Or, the landman comes out and gives the landowner some terms that says, this is what some attorney did for another landowner. Well, that doesn't mean that they did a good job. Nor does it mean that your neighbor landowner or somebody on the internet did a good job. And on top of that, that doesn't mean that you do not have much greater leverage than the person who is out there on the internet saying you should do this or you should do that, or your neighbor. You, despite the fact that you may be next door, you may have considerably more leverage than your neighbor, and you have to understand that. Likewise, when the landman says, and this just happened this week again, happens all the time, landowner says, the landman gave me this and said, this is what this other attorney negotiated and we'll give you this, and this is what they did for the client. Well, I look at this. I look at what they gave him, and I said, one of two things. Either the landman is not being completely truthful, or this was a really bad job done by an attorney who was probably inexperienced, assuming that's true. So you have to look at your circumstance. Got a little sidetracked because that's something that just really fired me up this week. But what I'm saying is, back to the estate planning, you need a plan for you, your circumstances. You have a certain piece of property. You have a certain life position. You have an age in your life. You have life goals. Everybody has different situations that they're in and different goals and plans. Though the goals sometimes may be, I want to preserve my assets for my children. I want to try to reduce any tax burden that I may be able to reduce. Well, yeah, of course, that's going to be a common goal that people share. However, how you achieve that goal can be very different depending upon your circumstances. So again, doing estate planning, a lot of unitization issues, well pads, meter sites, compressor sites, you name it, anything related to natural gas development. Been representing some more individuals who are considering selling their oil and gas rights. Please, if you are considering selling your oil and gas rights, I'm going to get commercial here. Just call my office. Call my office if you're seriously considering it, and schedule a consultation. And I'm not trying to do this to elicit or solicit business. What I'm trying to do is saying, listen, before you go down that path, you need to understand the potential problems. And nobody on that side is going to tell you those problems. So please, never, do not agree to anything. Do not sign anything. Give me a call, 570-307-0702. And please, I'm trying not to be commercial, but this is an idea or a concept in an important event that you need to do something about. You can't just go into this blindly. There are many problems with these transactions. In the right circumstances, I represent people and we go through that process. But we have that consultation, and every single person that I've had this initial consultation who is considering selling their oil and gas rights has been extremely pleased and satisfied and happy that we had that consultation. So that's why I'm saying it. I have no doubt in the world, if you are considering permanently selling your oil and gas rights, call me, Doug Clark, Clark Law Firm, get an appointment scheduled. We can do it by telephone, 570-307-0702. Do not sign anything if you're going to sell your oil and gas rights until we speak, or if it's not me, please somebody who knows what they're doing, because people are being taken advantage of all the time. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. And like I say, and I apologize, but I assure you, there is a lot of effort and time that I've been spending and we've been spending working on the Pipeline Attorney website. And it's going to come up this week. Very excited about it. As we sit here now, just going back and proofing the pages, a lot of content there, a lot of new material. Check out pipelineattorney.com. Really, really excited about it. It's been a long time in the making, but hopefully when you see it, it'll be worth it. So again, you can always contact me. This will be my last commercial part here of this segment. However, there are, of course, commercials in between the segments, but you can always contact me for any representation, 570-307-0702. And also, reminder, I'm so excited because I can finally, well, actually, I have to wait till next week, but I'm going to get close to it anyway. It will be, as of August 20th, I believe, I think that's the date, 5 years. 5 years I've been doing the radio show, All Things Marcellus. So super excited about that. I'll talk more about it next week because I am really excited about that fact that we've been doing this for 5 years. And look, I never was on the radio, to my knowledge, in my entire life before that. So pretty excited about that. Okay, and also I said, check out PAGasleaseattorney.com as well. We'll have today's radio show up and at 'em tomorrow, so you can go and listen in if you aren't able to catch a show. And we have a bunch of shows archived and available on the website at PAGasleaseattorney.com, and we're going to do the same thing with PipelineAttorney.com. And check out Facebook. You can go there to see the Clark Law Firm Facebook page and follow me on Twitter at Doug Clark Law. Okay, let's get into it. All right, so what I'm going to talk about today, and I apologize, I've been away a couple weeks here, but I'm going to talk about some royalty issues. And I'm going to start with this question that I get asked all the time. Virtually every single client who enters into a gas lease amendment, modification, whatever it may be, I get asked this question all the time. And if it were me in the landowner client's shoes, I would ask the question too. What is a more important question? What are you more interested in than this? The question is, can you tell me what I can expect for potential future royalties? What am I looking at here? I have whether you have 10 acres, 50 acres, 100 acres, whatever it may be. The landowner says, the client says, hey, what can I expect in the future by way of royalties? And my answer is always this. I don't know, and I can't tell you. But let me explain why I can't tell you and why I don't know. Then, the next thing I say, so if you ever become a client and you ask me this question, this is what you'll hear, and maybe you'll remember. I say then again, anybody, in my opinion, anybody who tells you what you can expect is one of two things is occurring. Either they are intentionally lying or misleading you in an effort to try to induce you or convince you or persuade you to sign a gas lease, pipeline agreement, or other contract. So that's one possibility. Or two, they just don't know what they're talking about. So I don't know which one's worse, which one's better. I don't know. But I do know this. I see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of royalty checks from across the state of Pennsylvania, from everywhere, from all kinds of different gas companies. I see them all the time. And what can I tell you? I could tell you that I cannot tell somebody what they should or can expect from future royalties. Well, there's all these calculators and there's this information online and you can enter information and data in. And, you can do that, but is that going to in any way give you a true result? Well, there are a lot of variables when you're entering this information in. Number one is, how much gas is this well going to produce? And I don't know anybody who can predict the type of production that you're going to get from a certain well. It's just not possible in my experience. Now, once it's drilled and once they start getting some tests and some initial information, well, maybe then you can have a better guess. But the reality is, when they haven't drilled a well and they go to drill that well, they're not going to be able to tell you the amount of gas that's going to be produced. Here's another example. I've been involved many times where there'll be a well or there'll be a well pad and there'll be, say, 2 wells drilled off of the well pad. Well, one well produces significantly higher than the other well drilled off of the same exact well pad. So sometimes these production numbers are close when, and I always say that the best way to try to gauge, generally in my opinion, the type of production you're going to see, well, if you have one well that's drilled, the wells that are going to be drilled next to it or close to it on the same pad, well, they're probably going to be fairly similar. However, that is absolutely not always the case. So just because you have one well that's producing at a certain level and say they're planning on drilling 4, 5, or 6 more wells, that doesn't mean that these other future wells are going to produce at that same level. They may be higher or they may be lower. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I'm going to talk more about why I can't tell people what you should expect with respect to future royalties. I'm going to explain to you why I can't tell people the answer to that question. I'll be right back. I'm a little rusty. I'll be right back. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark. And again, I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. on these stations. And if you miss any of today's show, go check out pagasleaseattorney.com. Again, pipelineattorney.com. If you haven't been to pipelineattorney.com recently, go check it out, pipelineattorney.com. We'll have this show and many others archived and available so you can listen at your convenience. Okay, what I'm talking about here is future royalties. Time and time again, understandably, I would ask the same question. Landowners come in, we negotiate, we do oil and gas leases, amendments, modifications, whatever the case may be. Maybe I'm working on a pipeline agreement with them. Maybe it's even in the state planning situation. And they say, hey, not that I'm trying to be greedy, but can you give me an idea of what I may reasonably expect in future royalties? Again, who in the world would not want to know that answer to that question? I certainly would. My response, hey, look, I'm really sorry, but I truly can't answer that question with any accuracy. And if anybody does try to answer that question, in my opinion, they're either purposely or intentionally misleading you, probably because it's a landman trying to get you to sign something, or they just don't know what they're talking about. That's my opinion. Obviously, people may disagree. So why do I say that? All right. There are so many variables that come into play, and they are significant variables that come into play when trying to estimate realistically what you may expect. I said in the first segment, I do see hundreds upon hundreds of royalty statements from across Pennsylvania. You can see a 100-acre landowner in one place and a 100-acre landowner somewhere else, and you see substantially different royalties that are being paid to those two individuals. So why is that the case? Well, again, there are so many variables. So I'm going to touch on some of them. I started in that first segment. One of the biggest variables is going to be you as a landowner are going to be paid royalties based upon how many acres of property or gas rights that you have in what's called a production unit. So that's number one. How many acres do you have in a unit? Now, I'm thinking up here. Let's make up an example. Let's make it simple. We'll keep a low number, but it could be any number. I'm going to say 10 acres. Make it simple. So if you own 10 acres and you have all 10 acres in a production unit, that's really good. That's what we want. As the landowner side, we want to have your acreage all in production units. Doesn't have to be in one unit, could be in others, but for the simple or multiple units. But for our simple example here today, we're going to say you have 10 acres and all 10 acres are in a single production unit. Again, for the purposes of talking about why I can't tell you what to expect. So, okay, we got 10 acres in a production unit. Now, you have this 10 acres, you're going to get paid royalties for each and every well that is drilled and producing in that production unit that you're a part of. So if there is only one well drilled and producing, you're going to be receiving royalties from that single well. However, in some units, you may have two wells that are drilled and producing. So you can say, well, if I was getting, and I'll make up numbers here too, if I was getting $500 a month, that's quite a bit of money, but we'll just use that for this example. If I were for a 10-acre property. So if I had 10 acres and I'm getting $500 a month, well, that's with one well. We're going to use that example. So, okay, what if there's a second well producing? Well, if it produced the exact same amount, you would receive an extra or additional $500. So in my example, one well in 10 acres is giving you $500 in a month. Well, the company has two wells drilled and producing in that production unit. Well, now, if they were identical, and remember what I said in the first segment, they're not going to be identical. But if they were identical, for illustration purposes, now you have two wells, so you're going to get double, and so now you're getting $1,000 a month. Well, play that out. Let's say that there are 4 wells drilled and all producing. Well, again, under this scenario, you're going to receive, instead of, if they're all producing identical, which they won't, but for illustration, you have $500 a month for each well in our example. So now you're getting, as a landowner, $2,000 a month. So let's say, go back in time here. If you're a landowner who has 10 acres in a unit, and under this example, only one well is producing, you're getting $500. But what if there are 4 wells producing? Well, now you're getting $2,000. So certainly the number of wells is an enormous variable. And there is no one who can tell you when you're signing a gas lease and there's no production occurring, or even if they've drilled a single well, but there's no one that's going to be able to tell you with certainty. And believe me, I deal with the gas companies every single day. There's no one that can tell you, here's exactly what we're going to drill, and go ahead and we're going to guarantee this is what we're going to drill. They'll say, well, we're going to drill one well, and then maybe we're planning on drilling another well or additional wells, but those plans are all subject to change. Given the market today, you're not seeing a lot of companies aggressively drill multiple wells on the same pad. You're not generally seeing that because there is such a surplus of gas in Pennsylvania that most companies are drilling a single well and not continuing the drill because the gas prices are so low that they don't want to continuously produce gas, which they're then feeling obligated or have obligations maybe to recoup their money to market this gas at these very, very low natural gas rates. These prices for natural gas are very low, no doubt about that. So companies are not aggressively drilling. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m., so don't miss us. Here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m., and if you miss any of today's show or any shows, go back to pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com, have shows archived there. Go back, catch up. We're going to get into the winter months, spend some time, get some information, become educated. Okay, so I'm talking about why we can't really estimate what a landowner may receive in future royalties. Question we're asked all the time. So one example is nobody can tell you with certainty how many wells are going to be drilled. So if you have one well drilled or if you have 6 wells drilled, you get paid royalties for the gas production from each and every well. So if you estimate, well, with one well, you get about $500 a month. But if you have 6 wells, now you're talking about, $3,000 a month. So for the year, you're talking about $6,000 or $36,000. That's a pretty darn big difference. But remember, that's only one variable. Only one variable. Perhaps the biggest variable, and I hate to say that because there are other very big variables here. Another very large variable is how productive is that well, or are the wells that are drilled? What do I mean there? Okay, let's say that you have one well drilled. Now remember, wells, you can go online, look at the numbers in DEP. There is a huge discrepancy between wells and production. Some wells we'll call monster wells that are producing like crazy with outstanding, incredible numbers, and others not so hot. That's unfortunately, that's just the way it is. You have a big discrepancy. You have areas that are very productive areas, and you have areas that aren't so productive. You can also have wells that are drilled. They may hit a fault or have some sort of problem, salt, some sort of issue, and they're not producing at very, very high rates. So there are a lot of different reasons that you may see this wide discrepancy with how productive wells are. Okay, so now let's play that out. Let's say that there's one well drilled in your unit. We'll go back to our 10-acre landowner. He has one well drilled in his unit, his or her, and that well's drilled, and it's a below average well. It's a poor producing well. And so now we have one landowner, 10 acres in a unit, only one well drilled, and it's not producing very well. Well, that landowner is not going to see great royalties because there's only one well and it's not a great producing well. Now, let's flip it, have some fun, and say here we have our other landowner, and he or she has 10 acres in a producing unit, and that unit has one well, but that well is a monster well. It's producing 3 times more than the other well, which is a poor producer. And frankly, it could be 5 times more. We could pick any number we want. But we're going to use this. It's producing 3 times as much as the poor producing well. And that's a relatively small spread. So what do we have there then? If all other circumstances are the same, we'll go back. Say the poor producing well is giving the landowner $200 a month in royalty. Well, the good producing well, if the leases were the same, that's going to give that landowner 3 times more, or $600 a month. So that's 3 times more. Now let's play it out some more. Say that well produced 5 times as much as the poor producer. So the one landowner is going to get $200 a month. The other one, who has a great well, gets $1,000 a month. Huge difference there. Huge difference. So let's take it even further. This is a great illustration as to how much discrepancy you can see with royalties. Now, 10-acre landowner, we're going to say again, one well, poor producing well. Next guy, girl, 10-acre landowner, monster well, producing 5 times as much as that poor producing well. But instead of only having one well drilled, that company has drilled 6 wells into that production unit. So that landowner with 10 acres is part of a unit that has 6 wells producing, and all 6 wells are producing 5 times more gas than the one well, which is a poor producer in the other landowner's unit. So let's think about this. We have a landowner who has one well, poor producer, and he or she is getting about, we'll say, $200 a month in royalties. Flip the page. We have the other landowner who has 10 acres, who is in a monster area. There are 6 monster wells drilled, and they're all producing 5 times as much as the other landowner's single well. So if the landowner in this scenario, I'm going to try to get my math right on here on the fly. So we got the single well producing $200 a month. Well, if the other single well in the other unit, which is a great well, is producing 5 times as much, that single well is giving that landowner $1,000 in that month. But now remember, in my example, I said there's 6 monster wells producing. So if they were each producing $1,000 worth of gas for that landowner in a month, well, 6 times 1,000, $6,000. So again, making up these numbers for illustration purposes, but in this scenario, the landowner with one well, poor producing well, with 10 acres in a unit is getting $200. The other landowner, $200 a month. The other landowner, all 6 wells are drilled and producing, and each one of them produces 5 times more than the poor producing well in the other unit. That landowner in a month is going to get, if my math is right, $6,000 a month. So under that scenario, you have one landowner getting $6,000 a month with 10 acres in a unit, and the other landowner only getting $200 a month. That's a heck of a variable. And nobody's going to be able to tell you with any certainty where you're going to be in that process. And I use those extreme examples. You could pick anywhere in between. You could have 3 wells. You could have 2 wells, 4 wells. You could say instead of producing 5 times as much, they only produce 2 times as much, 3 times, whatever you want to say, 10 times. Gives you an idea of all of these variables and why you can see enormous discrepancies in the amount of royalties a landowner may receive under the exact same lease. The lease percentage, 15%, 18, 12.5, whatever number we want to use. All right, I'll be right back after this break. I'm going to tell you about some more variables, and we're really going to have some fun with this. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m., and I'll be right back. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm, talking about future royalties, trying to estimate what you as a landowner may expect in future royalties. Like I say, I get asked that question all the time, and understandably so. I would ask the question, who wouldn't ask the question? Why not have some kind of idea what to expect? Again, my problem is you can't answer that question, in my opinion. And if you try to answer it, if you say you can answer it, in my opinion, it's for 2 reasons. One, you're trying to get the landowner excited because you're trying to get them to sign something like a landman, or you don't know what you're talking about, quite frankly, and you think you know, but you don't know. And here's what I was saying. I was talking about the first segment, your first couple segments here, huge variables. How many wells are producing gas? You get paid royalties for all of the wells, for each and every well that's producing gas that's in a unit that your property is a part of. So 1 well versus 6 wells, and we could say 7, 8, we could say 4, but the more wells, the more gas you're going to see. Then we talked about the discrepancy in production. Some wells are monster wells. Some wells are poor producers. That is a huge variable. Now, we're going to switch the page here. We're going to keep going. Now, resetting for those just joining, we have, on our little example here, we're just using a 10-acre landowner, and we're using an example saying that all 10 acres of this landowner's property are in a single production unit. So, to give more support to why you cannot, in my opinion, reasonably estimate with any accuracy future royalties. Here we go. So we said we have one landowner who has 1 well drilled, so only getting royalties from 1 well. In our example, that's a poor producing well. Then we have another landowner who has their 10 acres in a production unit, and that landowner has 6 producing wells, and they're all monster wells. Remember, No two wells are going to produce identically the same amount of gas. Not going to happen. But in our example, for illustration, we're saying that the one landowner only has one well drilled so far in their unit, and it's a poor producing well. The other landowner has 6 wells in their unit. Both landowners have 10 acres, and all 6 wells are monsters. And we're saying that, for this example, that the 6 monster wells are producing 5 times the amount of gas that the poor producing well is producing in this case. So let's have some more fun with it. All right, well, obviously, that's an enormous amount of variable between the royalty of the one 10-acre landowner with only one well, which is poor, the other landowner with 10 acres that has 6 monster wells. Well, what else can change? How about, as many people know who are getting royalties, the price of gas? The price of gas. And not many people predicted that we would start seeing royalty checks with a unit price of gas below $1. Literally below $1. So they're selling that gas, 1 MCF, 1,000 cubic feet of gas for, we'll say $1 and sometimes less. So $1 a unit. Now, been doing this for a while. I've seen royalty payments per unit up to $8, $10, and even higher dollars per MCF. Now, again, very rare, and sometimes you'll see these spikes, but let's talk about the variables then. So, back to our one guy. He has one well, 10 acres, poor producing. Let's say in that given month that, and I hate to keep beating this guy or girl up, the gas price is only $1 per MCF, or $1 per unit of gas. So he has a poor producing well, and he's only getting $1 per unit. Now, our fun guy who's in Hawaii and doing world trips and having a great time, he or she has 6 wells producing, monsters, and let's pick a month and say in a given month that landowners that they're selling gas that month at $5 per MCF. So there we go. That's 5 times more than obviously $1. So now put out that discrepancy. If you're selling at $1 or you're selling at $5, that's 5 times the difference. So without even going down the path of the fact that this one landowner in our example has 6 monster wells, let's just talk about any individual landowner, and even if you have one well. Okay, so if you have one well, and for a given year, the average price of gas, and boy, I hope it's not, but say the average price of gas is $1 per MCF. So in that year, you're getting paid royalties based upon gas being sold at $1 per unit. Well, let's say that the next year that the average price of gas, it ends up spiking, and it's $4 per unit as an average. Well, think about it. Obviously, if the same amount of gas were produced and you were getting $4 per unit of gas versus 1, well, there you go. You have 4 times as much money in royalties that you would receive, and those numbers jump around from month to month and from time period to time period. So to sit there to say, okay, hey, landowner, here's what you can expect with your 10 acres. Well, how are you making an assumption? Now, again, you can just assume and guess, but the reality is there's no way that you could know the price of gas in the future. So if you take a landowner whose gas is going at $1 per unit versus using a price of $5 per unit or $4 per unit, that's a big discrepancy. Also, again, on top of that, who knows how much gas these wells are going to produce? Enormous variable there. One may produce 5 or 10 times more gas than another. The price of gas may change. You may have multiple wells drilled, and that's going to impact the amount of royalty as well. All are enormous variables. I see checks, like I said, very often. So what are we looking at? I may see a landowner who 1 month, has dollar gas, and say that they get, use a small example, $500 per a month in royalty. And then, a couple months later, that gas price went up to $4, and it's in winter months. We tend to see them go higher. Well, now, if they were getting $500, then all of a sudden now they're getting $2,000. And those numbers jump around. So again, compound that with the uncertainty of the production, how productive are these wells going to be, and then also how many wells are going to be drilled, and you have another major variable that's going to significantly impact the amount of royalty numbers, literally money in pocket that landowner is going to receive. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. on this station. And join me, and also check out pagasleaseattorney.com and pipelineattorney.com for great landowner information. Whether you're looking for representation or information, check them out. And we also have the radio show posted. We'll have today's show up on Monday, and we do that all the time. And we have many other shows archived and available online. So, okay, hopefully now you have a flavor of some reasons why that you cannot predict accurately, in my opinion, what you may expect in future royalties. However, that's not even near all of them. When I gave my example, we used a 10-acre landowner, and we said that all 10 acres were in a production unit. Well, you could have 10 acres, and maybe only 5 of your acres is in a production unit in the short term. And maybe it may take 5 or 10 years, maybe it may even take longer for the remaining 5 acres to be placed in a production unit. So even though you have 10 acres, that doesn't guarantee that even when you're receiving royalties, that you're getting royalties for all of your property. Some of the property may not be placed in the production unit. Remember, you get royalties based upon the amount of acres that you have in the production unit. So, back to our example, if you have 2 10-acre landowners, one may have all 10 acres in a production unit, the other may only have 5 acres in the production unit. And there's no guarantee that you're going to be fully unitized, meaning all of your property will be placed in a unit. Now, there's no guarantee, but there are certainly cases where I do gas leases today, amendments, modifications, extensions, where we can get maps and we can see that in this particular case, we can tell that absolutely all of that property will be unitized essentially immediately once all the paperwork is filed, though we can see, yes, all 10 acres will be placed into this unit. So it is possible, but when you're just doing general leasing, you don't know that. You don't know it. So let's have some fun here and say, and we have this situation, take a 100-acre landowner and take a 10-acre landowner. And the 100-acre landowner has a certain idea what they're going to get in royalties. Well, say that 100-acre landowner only has 5 acres of their 100 placed in a production unit. The other 10-acre landowner, he or she has all 10 acres placed in a unit. 100-acre landowner only has 5 acres in a unit. The other 95 are sitting out there, not placed in a unit, not being developed yet. The other landowner only has 10 acres, but all 10 are in the production unit. Well, what happens then? Here's my tease. I'll be right back to tell you after this break. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm, here every Sunday from 8 to 9, and right back after. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I am here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. on this station to bring you the landowner information you need regarding natural gas development here in Pennsylvania. So, okay, we are talking about royalties and the question that everybody asks and everyone wants to know the answer to. And I say, well, I can't give it to you, but let me tell you why. That answer, or not the answer, but the question is, what can I anticipate? What can I expect in future royalties after I sign my gas lease? What can I expect? And you can go online, you can look at these royalty calculators, and you can have some fun with it. You can listen to the landman, and look, I don't know, and I'm sure it's happened, but I don't know that I've ever heard a landman underestimate future royalties for the landowner. Don't know that I've heard that ever. They have a tendency to overestimate. Why? Because why are they there? Landmen are there. The landman is at your door, is at your kitchen table, calling you, coming to your house. Why? To get you to sign documents, to get you to sign. Well, are you going to be more inclined to sign if you have this promise or these statements of significantly more future royalties? Or are you going to be more likely to sign when the landman says, well, they're probably only going to drill one well, gas prices are really low, not sure if this will be a great area, so you're probably not looking at a lot of royalties. Or are they going to say, well, we have some monster wells in the area. This company's the best company, great producer. You're going to get such a large number or large amount of royalty. Who's going to sign quicker? So, of course, the landman really likes to tell you a very high estimate of future royalties. And for the reasons I talked about earlier and I'm going to continue to talk about, there's just no way that you can accurately make those statements. So, okay. We talked about some of the variables. Just to recap, how many wells are drilled. You get royalties for each and every well that's drilled. How productive are those wells? Some wells are 5 times, 10 times, maybe more productive than other wells. So you have production, which is an enormous variable. So I talked earlier, you have 6 monster wells in your unit versus 1 poor well. How do you possibly compare the royalties if your acreage is the same and your royalty percentage is the same? So those are enormous variables. When I left the last segment, though, I said, okay, here's another thing. You can sit there and you say, all right, I'm a 100-acre landowner. I'm going to get all this money. Landman tells me how rich I'm going to be. I have 100 acres. I'm going to be rich. However, guy down the road has 10 acres, only 10. Well, that 10-acre person isn't thinking, well, I'm going to get as much money as the 100-acre person. However, how about this scenario? Say that 10-acre person who owns 10 acres has all 10 acres placed in a production unit. The 100-acre person owns 100 acres, but only 5 of the 100 are currently placed in a production unit. The other 95 are sitting out there waiting to be unitized in the future, and hopefully and probably, if there's gas there, that property will be. However, as of today, and this could last for years, the 10-acre landowner is getting paid royalties for 10 acres. 10 acres worth of production, because all 10 acres are in a unit, that's what they're receiving royalties on. The 100-acre guy, even though he owns 100 acres, only 5 of those acres are in a production unit. So if all else were the same, if the royalty percentage in the oil and gas lease were the same, and we can put this property in the same unit. Say that the 100-acre landowner has 5 acres in this unit, and the 10-acre landowner has all 10 in the same unit, and if their gas leases have the same payment terms, let's say they're 15% royalty with deductions, then if they're being paid by the same company, the landowner with 10 acres is going to literally get twice the money as the 100-acre landowner, because that 100-acre landowner only has 5 acres in the unit. Now, in the future, hopefully the other 95 acres gets placed in a unit for the 100-acre landowner, but right now, in the short term, that 100-acre landowner is only getting 5 acres worth of production, where the guy who only owns 10 acres is getting 10 acres worth of production because it's all in the unit. Now, let's have some more fun. Back to what I said before. Take the 100-acre guy who has 5 acres in a unit, and say those 5 acres are in a unit that has 1 well and it's a poor producing well. Then let's say the 10-acre landowner has his 10 or she has her 10 in a different unit, and that unit has 6 wells producing, 6 monster wells, and gas is flowing full. Well, now what do you have? You have a 100-acre landowner who's hardly getting any money because only 5 acres are in the unit, and there's only 1 well drilled in the unit, and it's a bad well. Versus the 10-acre landowner who has all 10 acres in a unit, 6 wells are drilled, and they're great producing wells, and they're all producing right now. Well, the guy with 100 acres is going to be making substantially less royalties than the guy or girl with the 10 acres in a unit that has 6 wells and is producing monster wells. Like I say, enormous variables. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. and really wanted to talk today about the question that I get asked all the time: what can I expect? What will be my future royalties? I get asked, I'm doing pipeline agreements for people. And again, I totally understand it. Who doesn't want to know? You want to plan. And look, there's another part of it. Hey, it's fun. It's fun. I mean, who didn't, when they were younger, sit back and say, oh boy, if I had $1 million, like when you're a kid, it's fun stuff. So you want to know, and you're hoping that it's good news, whether you're hoping to help your family, whether you're hoping for retirement, whatever the case may be. Who doesn't want to know those answers? But the problem is that many, many people are getting very bad information. They're being misled by people who have agendas, who want to mislead them. And then we have people that are out there on the internet. Oh, it kills me. You can say anything you want. You can say anything you want, doesn't make it true. You can say anything you want, it doesn't make it true. So, yeah, there are royalty calculators out there. And the landmen, they'll like to say, well, they take this super productive well, and they want to say, well, we're planning on drilling. They're going to drill 6 wells. I get that all the time, and I think now, it starts to catch up where people see, many companies permit, file for drilling permits for 4 wells, 5 wells, 6, sometimes 10 or more wells. Rarely, if ever, do they drill all of those wells in a row. Very, very rarely. You hear this unfortunate phrase out there a lot, one and done, meaning the company drills 1 well in the unit and then they're done. They move on, especially with today's gas prices and market. Think about 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Think about when the leasing rush was occurring and all these landmen, and I've seen it. I've had them tell me, oh, here's what you're going to make. Here's what your client's going to make. Oh, it's going to be so much money. It's going to be so much money. I wonder if you would have said, well, landman, what happens if the gas prices go down to $1 per MCF? What would happen then? What if the gas company only drills 1 well? What if not all of my property is unitized? What if those situations occur? Will I still be getting all the money you're promising me now? Well, of course not. And what would they probably say? Oh, well, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Why are they going to say those things? Because in their pocket is a pen, in their briefcase is their notary stamp. They want you to sign that document. Same thing with pipeline agreements. Here they are. Well, landowner, we can't get royalties to you unless we get that gas to market. In order to get that gas to market, we need pipelines. And we have it tough. The price of gas is low, so we can only offer you this certain amount for your pipeline agreement. And, woe is us, woe is us. Well, these prices are not going to stay low forever. They absolutely are not. One example I use, within the last 6 months, I had a client represented, and it was a southwestern part of the state, one of the highest, if not the highest lease bonus that I ever had a client sign. One of the highest, if not the highest. I'd have to check, but way above what was the standard highest. And I think this was the highest bonus that I ever had a client who signed. And that was within the last 6 months. So what does that tell you? Well, this company certainly recognized, and it was a big company, they certainly recognized that gas prices aren't going to be this way forever, and this is a valuable property. These pipelines, they're going to stay in the ground 50, 100, and I believe in most cases 100 plus years. Well, it depends. I shouldn't say most cases, but a very, very long time. I deal routinely with easements that are 50 years old that people signed in the past, and that was before any of this type of production. Also, we talk about, how long is this going to occur? Well, if you're only drilling 1 and done, if the company's only drilling 1 well, and maybe they're permitting 6, maybe 8, maybe 10, but they drill 1 today, and that well can produce, 20 to 30 years, and who knows, technology maybe more. But we'll be conservative. Let's say that they drill 1 well. If they want, they can sit on it for at least the 20 years it produces under almost every lease. Almost. There are some group leases where there's exceptions. But you can drill 1 well in most cases as a company, drill it and let it sit, produce from that 1 well, wait 20 years, and then drill another well. And if you still don't like gas prices and you still don't want to produce more, you could sit another 20 years. And remember, you've permitted 6 wells in this example. So now you can wait another 20 years and drill the third, another 20 and drill the fourth, another 20 and so on and so on. And who knows, maybe you can even drill more wells than that. So they have a lot of flexibility. So here you are, a landowner, saying, okay, this is great, I'm going to get this money. Well, what if they drill one well now, and that's all they drill, and the wells do deplete, and everyone knows, or most people know about this decline curve of production. Well, in 5 years, 10 years, that well may be hardly producing anything, and the company, because of the price of gas, isn't motivated to drill more wells. So if you're sitting there, looking and counting, seeing dollar signs and counting your money, you may be incredibly and terribly disappointed. You need to know these things. It's about getting good information. Now, you might have fun. Be on the flip side. 6 wells drilled, they're monsters. Price of gas goes up, a lot more money in your pocket. My point is, nobody, in my opinion, can tell you with any accuracy what you should expect in future royalties. And if they try to, in my opinion, they're lying, misleading you, or they just don't know. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. Join me back here next week from 8 to 9 a.m. Have a great week.